This week's Parashat Toldot, we have the struggle between Yaakov and Esav. Already in their mother's womb, they're already fighting inside their mother's stomach. Then Yaakov comes out grabbing onto the ekev of Esav. And then we have the famous story of the lentil soup where Yaakov Avinu buys the Bechorah, he buys the birthright, the shayachut, the ability to have land in Eretz Yisrael, the birthright. And then ultimately, at the end of the parasha, we have the story of Yaakov tricking his father, pretending to be Esav, and getting the berachot, the bracha for the parnasah, the bracha for the wealth, for the agriculture, the tirosh v'dagan for the wheat. And ultimately, Yaakov gets the brachot that we say in the Shemayim was always supposed to be his. But especially that last story, even in the one before with the selling of the soup, there are some questions. But especially the last one where he dresses up like Esav, tells his father, Ani Esav, where do you put the comma on that line? But he basically tricks his father, and the pasuk says he does it b'mirma. He does it by trickery, by hiding himself. So what's going on with this story? Why is this happening? So I heard an awesome idea. I heard it in the name of the Rekanati. The truth is, I looked up the Rekanati. I saw some cool ideas in the Rekanati, but didn't find the whole Dvar Torah that I heard. But then I looked it up in some other sources, and we'll get to the ideas that I heard. But let's first look at our parasha. So the Rekanati by our parasha is talking about, okay, what's this whole back and forth? Yaakov, Esav. Also, why is Rivka involved? Why is it the mother who's coming in, this female figure, saying, listen to me, Yaakov, even though Yaakov is Ish Emet, it's very hard for him. She says, no, you got to do what I say. And then she dresses him up. She makes the special food, and she sends him in. And she says, ultimately, Alai, on me, is there going to be any klala, any curses will fall on me. She ultimately does die. Pretty young, never seeing Yaakov again, but she's willing to take it all upon herself, because as we said in previous Divrei Torah in previous years, the mother, the mama Rivka, Rivka Imenu recognizes that it's very important that Yaakov gets this beracha. So what's really going on over here? So if you open up the Rekanati, so the Rekanati quotes a Kabbalistic teaching that when we look at Yaakov and Esav, we really have over here, we have a bit of taking ourselves back to the Garden of Eden. And it says that Yaakov Avinu, he symbolizes Adam Arishon, like we mentioned once in the past, that in the Kisei HaKavod in the Shamayim, there's a picture of an Adam, which they say is Adam Arishon, but it looks so similar to Yaakov Avinu, that Yaakov Avinu, in a certain sense, has this deep connection to Adam Arishon, because they say he's here to bring about the tikkun of Adam Harishon. And then we have ourselves Esav. Esav is supposed to correspond to the Nachash, to the snake. We know that ultimately, Yaakov comes out grabbing onto the ekev of Esav, but back in the story of Bereshit, back in the story of creation, it's the snake that's going to bite us on our ekev. So there's this concept of Esav being the symbol of the Satan, of the Samech Mem, being the symbol of the Yetzer Hara, being a symbol of the Nachash. Actually, I was reading, so some of the mystical sources say that you have the Samech Mem, that evil angel that symbolizes the Satan. So he's riding on a Nachash, but in other versions, he's riding on a Gamal, he's riding on a camel. So I saw brought down that in a Sefer Svat Hayam, so he writes, that's why Rivka is the one that's always riding on the camel. She's always riding on the Gamal, because she's here to make the tikkun, to fight against the Yetzer Hara, to fight against the Esavs in the world. So there's a certain level. Rivka herself is part of the tikkun, so she gets to ride a camel as well to counter the Yetzer Hara on the camel. Okay, but let's get back to the Rekanati. Says the Rekanati, he actually takes us back to the story of Bereshit, because he tells us, if you look in Bereshit, you're going to see that our Yaakov and Esav story is really the earlier story of the snake and the sin of Adam Harishon. And the Rekanati explains that this Nachash, this Yetzer Hara, so he makes his original fight, he makes his original attempt to get us to sin through the Isha, through Chava. So actually there's other Sfarim bring down, I mentioned that Sefer Sefat Hayam, he has a whole 50 pages of our Torah to try to explain how Rivka is really a Gilgul of Chava. That part of what Rivka is doing, why she's so involved in this story, is because she is here to try to fix the sin of Chava. So we have now, in our story, it's a mother and a child, it's Rivka and Yaakov, but really Rivka in a certain aspect is going to correspond to Chava, and Yaakov Avinu is going to correspond to Adam Rishon and the original sin. So back to the Rekanati. So the Rekanati tells us that we had this great Ilana Kadosh. We had, the Etz HaChaim. We had this tree that we were supposed to eat, and that Etz HaChaim was supposed to be unbelievable, giving us full life. We always compare that to the Etz HaChaim of the Torah. We really were supposed to have this unbelievable good stuff. But because of this, the sin of the Nachash, or the temptations of the Nachash, we lost those brachot. In a certain sense, maybe even we can say that the Satan, the Samach Mem, took those brachot, but it was supposed to be our brachot, the blessings that were going to come about from eating from the Etz HaChaim. We never got it. So he says, this all took place ad sheba ilan acher, until there was a future tree that came about. Who was that? Ilan kadosh shehu Yaakov velakach et kol berachot. He says the story of Yaakov by us in our parasha is Yaakov coming to get the brachot back, because the Samech Mem, Esav, they had stolen those original brachot, or they held back the brachot that were supposed to come to us. And there's actually a whole deeper backstory over here that we know. There's one opinion that says that the etzadat was chita, it was wheat, and the bracha that Yitzhak blesses Yaakov, thinking that it was Esav, was the blessing for the dagan, for the wheat. So there's a certain tikkun in the etzadat here as well. But says the Rekanati, Ki Yaakov haya domeh l'adam harishon, ki yofyo she Yaakov haya ki yofyo she Adam harishon. He says Yaakov was as beautiful here in spiritual senses as well as Adam harishon was. We're reading the translation of the Kabbalah that he has over here. Ve'al ken kamo shemana samech mem et habrachot ma'ilan harishon shehu Adam harishon, kach mana Yaakov shehu ilan domeh l'adam harishon et habrachot mesamech mem lemala u'mesav lemata. So he says Yaakov Avinu was making a tikkun over here, midah keneged midah. You Yetzer Hara took away our bracha. Now we're going to take away your bracha. Okay, that's the Rekanati that I found. Apparently, there's more in the Rekanati somewhere where he speaks about how Yaakov has to actually do this through trickery. So I couldn't find it there, but I found a different sefer that's called Ha'arot Atmimim Anash. It's a sefer of some Chabad Hasidim, and in the sefer, they actually quote the Abir Yaakov Abu Chatzera. So we've been quoting so many weeks, the past couple of weeks, the Abir Yaakov Abu Chatzera in his Petuchei Chotam. It's not in my Petuchei Chotam, so it's apparently a different Abir Yaakov. It's a couple of Svarim on the parasha that I don't own. So in his Chabad Sefer, they quote the Abir Yaakov. So I guess HaKadosh Baruch Hu this year wants us to be learning his Torah. Says the Abir Yaakov, he goes even a little bit further. He says that Mivi alashon sheYaakov tiken chet adam rishon karaui. So says this Chabad Sefer that the Abir Yaakov says that Yaakov fixed the sin of Adam Rishon properly. V'zeh ramzor razal b'divreihem, and this is what it means when Chazal tell us that the beauty of Yaakov is like the beauty of Adam Rishon, as we saw in the Zohar quoted in the Rekanati. And says the Sefer, and the Abir Yaakov, he explains this unbelievable. Hine Yitzhak Avinu ratzah letaken chet adam rishon al yedei brachot sheratzah letet le'esav. So he says Yitzhak wanted to fix the sin. He thought the way to fix the sin was through Esav. Now I'm not 100% sure why he thought that way. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll find eventually which Sefer of the Abir Yaakov, because the Oz of Hadar, I think, translated almost all of them and gave footnotes on this. But he thought for some reason that he has to do it through Esav. So he thought that the time was proper, that we can fix the Satan himself, we can fix the Nachash himself. He says, and that's why he called over Esav, whose source, his essence, is the original Nachas, and he actually brings down in parentheses that Esav Ayin Sin Yud Vav is Gematria Nachash, V'shalechu lasadeh. And he says, he went out to the field. He says, go to the field, bring me back food. Makom gidulo shel nachash. It's the field, that's where the nachash grows and where he is. Ubikshu she'achin avaro ochel. And he told him, prepare for me food. He says the original sin was eating from the etzadat, was through food, through improper eating. So now he's telling to the nachash, he's telling Esav, go make for me food. You made them sin with food. Now I want you to make a mitzvah with food. Let's make the tikkun. But continues the Sefer. Esav lo haya kli lakach. He says no, but Esav wasn't the proper kli. Esav was not supposed to be the one to make the tikkun. V'lachen na'asa tikkun al yedei Yaakov b'mirma kemo nachash. And he says, and that's why it's Yaakov who's going to make the tikkun. He's going to do b'mirma. He's going to do it through trickery. Because what do we know about the nachash? The nachash shaya arum. Because we say that the nachash was Arum, which means he was trickery, he was sly, he was clever. Arum is the same language as naked, interestingly enough, but we're going to see in a second. We're talking about clothing in 1 second. But the Nachash used trickery. He used mirma. So therefore, we have to use mirma in order to fix the original sin. If the original sin came through trickery, came through hiding and sneakiness and all of that, so to mitaken that, you have to now take it and use it for a mitzvah, and that's the full midah keneged midah, and that's why Yaakov had to do it in a way to answer that famous question. How could Yaakov do it in such a trickery kind of way? How is that right? Yaakov is ish emet. But the ish emet understood that in the higher level emet, if we have to fix the arum nachash, we have to do it in that same language of arum. And he says also, va'ayedei Rivka. We also need Rivka to be involved. She'achet shenasa ayedei Rivka, ayedei Chava, because it came through Chava, the feminine. As we mentioned, the other sefer brings down Rivka is the gilgul of Chava. So Rivka is now coming to fix the feminine part of the sin. Bisholo et bigdei Esav hamudot shekiyadu hayu elu begadav shel adam harishon. And then what does she do? She brings over Esav's clothing. That's the famous coat that, according to Midrash, she got from Nimrod. That Nimrod had gotten from Adam harishon. So basically, it's the clothing of Adam harishon. Now, meaning it's the clothing of Shehu Achoteh, meaning Adam Rishon who had sinned. Now he's putting on the sinner's clothing. I mean, Yaakov is really now taking on the role of Adam Rishon, even putting on the clothing that symbolizes the sin, and then he goes in now to make the actual tikkun. Now, we actually mentioned in the past from many sources that originally Yaakov Avinu, or originally Adam Rishon had a ketonet or with an olive, it was a glowing skin, but then after he sinned, he actually became naked. He really saw that he was naked, but he also lost the ketonet or, that clothing of light, and instead it got replaced with the clothing of or with an ayin, the leather clothing, which according to some interpretations, that leather clothing came from the Nachash himself. The Nachash sheds his skin. The skin of the Nachash, that was a leather snake skin coat, so God gave it to him to cover himself up from the sin. You want to make a tikkun there too, but right now it's unbelievable, because if Yaakov really is trying to take the place of Esav, Yitzhak thought Esav, we need the Nachash to make the tikkun himself. No, Esav wasn't ready, Esav wasn't there. We need Yaakov to now dress up in the snakeskin clothing, in the sin itself, and bring about the tikkun. And he goes on, he says, Gan Eden, and since the sin was in Gan Eden, Gama tikkun tzarich liot be'oto makom. So too, that we have to take ourselves back to Gan Eden. And there's so much imagery in our story that when Yaakov walks in, it says that Yitzhak smelled the smell, and Chazal tell us he could smell the smell of Gan Eden, the reach of Gan Eden, because we said Yitzhak Avinu, when after the Akedah, according to one opinion, he went up to Gan Eden to actually learn Torah, so he knows what Gan Eden smells like. But right now we have Yaakov walking in with the clothing from Gan Eden, with that special coat that Hashem, the ketonet or with the ayin, that Esav had somehow gotten through Nimrod, but now Yaakov has it. He's wearing the clothing, but we have that smell of Gan Eden. We're back in that place, and the original sin came from the Isha who had messed up, so therefore we have to have an Isha, we have to have Rivka, who her job, or Rivka, who's able to ride the camel, she's able to ride the gamal, she could conquer the Yetzer Hara, she now could begin to make that tikkun. He says that also explains that part of the punishment as well was that the ground became kotz v'dardar, became thistles and spikes, and basically the ground was no good anymore, and that's why the bracha right now is v'yiten lecha rov dagan v'tirosh. You're now going to have all of the good grains. We're fixing the chita, we're fixing the grapes. Again, we have over here both opinions. Was the etzadat? Was it chita? Was it geffen? But over here we're having a tikkun of all of these things. But also we know that the original chet took place because Adam listened to his wife. And afterwards, when Hashem says, "Why'd you do this?" He goes, "Because the woman you told me to the one that you gave me as this wife, she made me do it. She told me to do it." Meaning, I listened to my wife. So the listening to the wife, in a certain aspect, we said in the past that's negative. Take responsibility. What are you blaming your wife for? But in a certain sense, it was the wife's idea. There was a mistake over here. Rivka understands that, so we find that when it comes to the imahot, they now are going to try to make a tikkun, but they're not going to make a tikkun by not speaking anymore. They're going to make a tikkun by saying the right things, and that's why whenever Sarai Imenu spoke, God tells to Abraham, when it came to Ishmael, when it came to Hagar, God says, whatever Sarai Imenu tells you, listen to Sarai Imenu. She knows what she's talking about. And now here as well, Rivka is making the tikkun, so it's going to be her idea, it's going to be her plan, and she's telling her son, Alai, all the problems, it's because of me. All the klalot, anything that can happen, it's what I did back then when I was originally Chava. It was my advice that was the bad advice. Now we have to make a tikkun. I'm going to give good advice, but if I'm giving good advice, you got to listen to me. And that's why Yaakov, while he's now taking on the role to make the tikkun, it has to be through Rivka and through listening to Rivka, because it's going to be the call of the Isha that's now going to be used to make the full tikkun. Shabbat Shalom.